Okay, I start recording the session. Okay. So, guys, welcome to Surat MuleSoft Meetup 29. And topic for today's meetup is like we will going to see how to do the batch processing. And Chetan Joshi will be the speaker for this session. So, like the safe harbor statement, like both speaker and host are organizing this meetup in the individual capacity only, and we are not representing any company here. Basically, the presentation is strictly for learning purpose only. Organization and presenter do not hold any responsibility. That same solution will work for your business requirement. The presentation is not mean for any promotional activities. So guys, there are some housekeeping activities. So generally you will find the recording on the YouTube within the 24 hours. Like you can ask question at any time in the middle of session via chat, or you can also speak up. Okay. And also it's very important to give the feedback at the end of the session basically. So you will be receiving a feedback form, so you can provide the feedback, so myself, Jitendra Bapna, and I'm working as a senior solution architect level 3 at EPM Systems. So I have overall 13 plus years of experience in APIs and integration. Basically, yeah, I am the MuleSoft certified integration architect and the platform architect. Nitish, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, Jackie. Thank you. Welcome all. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nitish Jain. I'm working in Accenture, and I'm all MuleSoft certified developer architect. And I'm holding 3 years of experience in MuleSoft. That's all from my end. Welcome all.
Here I will come back to you. Okay. So like agenda we will discuss, like we have already have an introduction, batch processing, live demonstration, then there will be a trivia quiz. Okay. Yeah, Chetan, you can share your screen so you can take it from here. I will unshare my screen.
Okay. Thanks, Jitendra,
Yeah.
and the team. Thanks for inviting me to this Surat meetup. So, as you all know, my name is Chetan Joshi, and I'm associated with Epicero from past more than 2 years, and I'm into MuleSoft from past more than 2.5 years. I'm certified MuleSoft integration architect, and currently working as an associate solution architect at Epicero. So I'm contributing to MuleSoft community as a mentor and leader for one of the group which is Indore. So I'm excited to be part of this group too, and nice to see you and talk to all the lovely audience.
And I want to add more thing about the Chetan. So Chetan is like helping lot in the forums, answering lot of the questions, lot of in forums, like especially on data wave, batch processing. Like he have a good like knowledge on this all these topics basically. So I have seen like he's the top top person who is giving a lot of answers in the MuleSoft forum basically. Yeah. So that's all about Chetan.
Thanks, Jackie, for the kind words. Okay, so let me share my screen. Uh, Hope you all can see it. So, as you all know, today's topic is we will be diving more into what and how a mule batch processing works. So, we might have gone through different terms like ETL, ELT, and here finally in MuleSoft, we have something called batch processing. Before getting into the MuleSoft batch processing, we will try to understand what exactly these ETL and ELTs are. So when we say ETL, it's nothing but stands for extraction, transformation, and loading. So it generally deals with when we have a lot of data which needs to be migrated from one systems to another. That can be an OLTP system or OLAP system, which is nothing but used for business processing or to maintain the transaction history. So in that case, we use ETL and ELT processing. So when we say ETL, in this type of processing, what we generally do is we first get the data from all the source system. It can be a group of homogeneous or heterogeneous system from which we can extract the data, which is nothing but the extraction phase. And when we say we are doing a transformation, it may include removing the redundancy, processing the data according to the target system, uh, encrypting it, giving it a signature. That's all totally depend on how and what format that the end system needs it. And after this transformation phase, we generally move to the third phase, which is the last phase, which is loading and moving the data from that staging environment where that data is transformed to final to a system. It can be a cloud based on premises, anything. And when it comes to ELT, it's something that last two steps get switched over. So we first just extract the data and load into the end systems. So we are not that type of system is not responsible for uh, doing any transformation or doing any kind of encryption or filtering out the data from the extracted sources. And we just give that whatever we are getting from the source system to the target system, and the target system is eventually responsible for doing all the operation over it. So this is the basic difference in ETL and ELT systems. And we can always choose between these two types of processing depending on the different use cases. But mostly what we have seen in MuleSoft is we mostly go with ETL processing because MuleSoft provides us what we say the data weave, the best scripting for it, which can be used for optimized transformation and fast transformation. So what we generally mostly see following here in most of the use cases is the ETL batch processing. Now the word comes is the batch processing. So first we need to understand what batch processing exactly is. So as you know, as the name says, batch processing is nothing but processing the records in batches. Batches is nothing but the group of records. So cumulatively, we can say it's a processing of group of records in a way. It can be synchronous or asynchronous, but in case of MuleSoft, when we talk about batch processing, it's totally asynchronous. Like when I say asynchronous, it's just a trigger and forgot thing. Let's say end user, the end user can be a client or any end systems or any scheduled job or some third party application like jams, which is which is triggering that job. So this kind of batch processing requires minimal user interaction because, as I mentioned, it's a fire and forget thing. And at the behind the curtains, what it do is it does all the processing based on the flows what we have configured and what we have made it. And as we talked about the ETL and ELT systems, it generally deals with the high volume of data. So we mostly consider batch processing when we need to go with processing or loading of high volume of data from one systems to another. So now let's move on to why and when batch processing. The one criteria always is when we have high load or high volume of data. If it's a small volume, we can always go with synchronous processing or simple flows, which can do the migration of a small amount of data from one systems to another. Let's say synchronizing each records from Salesforce to ServiceNow on record basis. So that is something which doesn't require batch processing. But when we say we have to do migration of data once a day, once in every day, so we can go with batch processing, and that volume can go up to a millions also. So totally, it depends on the volume of data, and we majorly use when we want to synchronize two systems or we want to flow some transaction from one systems to another. Do we have any questions, Jackie?
Make the screen presenter mode.
Yep. Sorry for that.
Yeah, we are good for.
Okay, great. Uh, so now let's move to what MuleSoft has provided us for batch processing in Mule 4. So we have always I have given multiple sessions on this topic, and we'll again discuss about the uh, about the component what is provided by MuleSoft. So we generally get three components from MuleSoft, which is the batch job, batch steps, and batch aggregator. So a batch job is consist of batch steps, and each batch step can have a batch aggregator. So we will discuss more about in detail about all these components moving forward. So this is how the high level flow looks like when we talk about batch processing. So you can see we have event sources, event processor, and finally that is giving the data to the batch uh, job. So batch jobs have batch steps, and batch steps can have its own processors and aggregators. An aggregator can again have its own processor within it. As I mentioned, this is totally asynchronous. So whatever main thread which is running this event sources and event processors will be jumped to the next processor if we have anything after the batch job, and a different thread in a asynchronous manner will be processing all this what is part of this batch job. Okay, moving on to next. So we generally have three phases or three steps which are followed when a batch processing is in execution. The first is load and dispatch. The second one is process, and the third one is on complete. So we'll discuss first about load and dispatch. So as the name says, load and dispatch, the batch job takes an array of records. So there are some constraint which needs to be followed. So what you can give any iterators arrays, array list, JSON, array JSON, or CSV to that batch job. So it will be considered as collection, and it will be the first phase will be initiated, which is load and dispatch. So the if we have any other format which is not supported by batch job, which we should be transforming it first to the supported type before giving it to the batch job. So what it does in load and dispatch phase, it loads the data, into the queues. So behind the scenes it follows some queue mechanisms to maintain all the information of all each and every record, and those queues will be created. If we see in local, it is created, and in the cloud hub also you can see those queues with a prefix called bsq, and it will also include the batch instance id, which is nothing but the correlation id of that particular batch job. So it's a totally a implicit step. What it does internally is takes all the data based upon whatever configuration you have given. It creates the queues and bifurcates it depending on the configuration. So this is what load and dispatch phase does. And once the queue is ready, we have that has all the information for the execution. It will move to the second phase, which is processing. But one more thing to mention, it create persistent queues. So when we say persistent queues, the information about those queues retains even after a crash or any termination of that batch process due to xyz reason. So whenever that mule server comes in, or that application reboots, it will run from the same save point where it stopped at the last. So hence we call it a reliable solution, because it is maintaining all the information in persistent queues. So after that we get the processing phase, which includes the batch steps. So we can have multiple batch steps in the we can have multiple batch steps in a batch job. It is totally asynchronous. So the things before the before this processing phase is all synchronous, like this loading and dispatching works in a synchronous way. But as soon as the thread enters this second phase, it totally becomes asynchronous. So based upon whatever queues are there, it start executing. So let's move to the studio and we'll see how exactly all these components look like.
Chetan, one question is there.
Yeah.
Basically, there are few questions.
Mhm.
So, when can we go for each and batch processing? I have a 10,000 record. Which one we can choose?
Yeah, it totally depends on use case. We have multiple factors to decide upon. The first main factor is what you require. Is it, do you really require asynchronous processing or synchronous processing? If your client is waiting to get a proper response about what happened to their request, then you should go with processing. If again there is one more clause, if the those 10,000 records and each records don't have that much of payload, so it can be a very quick thing if you are not doing any major uh, processing on it. But again, if it is the payload volume is very high and you think it will gonna take more than the actual what one to one response should take, then definitely you should go with something asynchronous, which is batch processing, and you can always have a callback endpoint at the client end which tells about the status of that particular request.
Yeah. The next question is: Is it possible to make batch queue non-persistent?
No, like it is something which is not under our control. This is something configured internally by MuleSoft, and it does follow the persistent queues. Like it maintains all those queues. So, but if you want to get rid of those queues, let's say if it crashed and you don't want to rerun it, then in that case, if you have on premises hosted server, then you can always go there and clean it up. But in cloud hub, what you have to do is we might get uh, that clearing option there as object store, or you can also just delete the application if it's feasible for you and redeploy it, so
Yeah.
it will clear up those queues.
So, in load and dispatch step, parallel processing queue is possible.
It's a question. No, like in load and dispatch, what it exactly doing is it just creating it's just creating the queues and accumulating all the information required to trigger that batch processes. Let's say if you have given something to the batch process, if you just trigger that batch process and you have a transformer just after that, so this will output the what on how many total records that batch have, or what are the instances id and some relevant information, and the its status it will show it as executing. So load and dispatch is something which is serial to the
Okay.
main thread.
The next question is: batch job work sequentially or parallelly? It's parallelly, right?
Yes, it totally depends on our configuration. So we will discuss about all those properties which we configure to a batch job. It defines it will run in parallel or sequential.
Right. So, can't we use an async scope in for each block?
Yeah, you can always do that, but that is not recommended, because you have to do your own coding and creating own flows when anything goes wrong, let's in case of error handling. But when I go with batch processing, it's already taken care of. We have a vast variety of functions, and it have more controlled processing, what you say.
Right. The next question: Do we need to enable a persistent queue checkbox in Runtime Manager for any batch processing application?
No, that's in the cloud.
Yeah, I think this is for VM queue, right? For persistent queue, like we have an option in Cloud Hub, right? Enable the persistent queue. That is for VM queue, basically, right? It's
Yeah,
not for.
yeah. It actually reflects all type of queues, and it is not recommended. Like when we visit MuleSoft documentation, clearly says if your application is dealing with any kind of batch processing, it can impact its performance if you are going with persistent queues checkbox. So what it generally does is it use SQS at the behind the scenes if you enable that persistent
Correct,
queues, and it is not recommended when you are using a batch processing with that persistent queues option.
correct, correct. When we say batch job queue is a persistent, does it depend on the persistent checking cloud? We already answered this. How are the record process within the block? Is it sequential or parallel?
Yeah, again, yeah, what we try to achieve here is parallelism is or concurrency, but it totally depends on your configuration. Like if you have given something wrong which should not be there, then it will result in sequential also. Let's say if we discuss about this, we'll discuss about when it will be a sequential, when it can behave like a sequential processing. I will answer that moving forward.
Okay. Darshan, like how does max current currency this will come, right? Max current currency parameter will come, right? You will explain during demo, right, Chetan?
Yes, yes, we will discuss all about each and every property and how it affects the batch processing.
Can we delete the message in load and dispatch queue automatically?
Uh, I will show you if you are running in on premises or MRT is a standalone, you do have control over those queues. But that is not recommended. If the batch is in processing, you should not delete something and go there, because it will lead to crash of the whole system, right? But if your application is stopped and you still see some queues, you can just go there and clean it up if you want control uh, control it manually
Yeah. Yeah. So how does processing behave when we run it in cluster mode?
in clustered.
So basically,
Okay,
I think the best scheduler will run on the basically on the
only the
primary node.
primary node. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if it's a scheduled even if it's if that endpoint is triggered by some external system, let's say, so it will always land on to the same uh, or on the one node only, not the every node. So yeah, so
Correct.
what node wherever that event is triggered, it is responsible for running that batch process.
Okay. There's a one more question. I am okay with data loss and I don't want to resume the batch processing after flow breaks. So can we use the queue as a non-persistent? Does it will improve performance?
As a non-person, so in that case you can always use, there is a property called max failed records. Okay, so if you say there's some error and due to that your batch is stopped, so if you configured as even if one record is filled, your batch will be stopped and the queue will be cleared.
Okay. If primary node shut down in cluster, data sync up will happen automatically. Karthik, I don't think so. Like you have to no, it should not happen, right? Automatically sync up will not happen. In that case, we have to use the VM queues and all a reliability pattern, right?
Yes, like if we have a cluster and the nodes are totally segregated, like a node is not aware of what other node have, like the object store or anything, I don't think it will resume from that point.
Yeah, in that case, we can make use of VM queues. Basically, you need to like push the data to VM so other node can pick the data, and also you need to make sure you are implementing the proper transactions and all this reliability pattern. That is how you can ensure that the data is automatically sync up between two clusters, basically two cluster nodes. So how to decide the aggregator size based on input load?
Again, yeah, it depends on the end system, what you are exactly doing in that aggregator. Let's say you are sending it to an API, okay, which takes in 100 objects at a time in an array, then you can send 100 in a batch, in that 100 as a size of that aggregator, so it will finally reach out to the end system. Because whenever we are aggregating and pushing it to some place, we have to always take care of the end system also, like it will be able to take that load or not. And if we are aggregating the stuff, we should also take care of our heap memory, what is being used, because at a point like when the size grows, it always use the file system to store those information. But again, when we are aggregating, it also impacts the heap size also. So again, it totally depends on what you are aggregating and what you are uh, calling after aggregation.
Okay. One more question. I have to process 10 million of data. Okay.
Mhm.
And there can be spike in volume at a certain instance. What should be the integration style? Is it going to batch trigger ETL or microservices architecture? What is more appropriate answer? I need the output of those recording CSV file.
Okay, so again, it depends. Like if it's a sudden, what does exactly mean when you say sudden spike? So when you say you want to accumulate all the results, so if those requests are what I say is diversified throughout the day, then you should be um, aggregating it to, as soon as it lands within that day. But if it's something which can wait, or um, uh, what we say, it can be done once a day, then you can go with batch also. Hope I
Okay.
answered it, but you can make question a little bit more clearer if I don't
Uh,
answer it.
okay. So Purban, like, is this clear your question? Like, otherwise, I will enable your mic. You can speak up. Like, exactly what is your question? Let me check. You can speak up. Like, I already enabled your mic. Hello.
Uh, okay.
Okay.
He says have an issue with his mic.
Okay. So like I will give the answer, like I will add some more thing, like so if you want to process a million of record, and like so basically you have to ensure that you are allocating the proper v cores and all those things, right? So that's also important part. Like if you are saying like I want to process 10 million of record with point 0.1 v core, which will be not possible, correct? So you have to ensure that you do the proper load testing, and you have to ensure that, like a proper v core allocation is done to your batch job basically. There's a one more question. As you told, the data will be loaded into batch queue during the load and dispatch phase. Does it have any size limit?
Not as of now. Like if you are going with Cloud Hub, with point 0.1 vCore, we get 8 GB of file storage with 512 MB, right? So it totally depends on how much file storage you have. So it totally depends on your file storage. Yeah,
Okay.
we don't.
I think we have done with all the questions. Yeah, we can go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, that's a lovely interaction. Let's move forward. So we will first see now about what exactly this batch job is. So this whole scope is called batch job, which can have multiple batch steps. And batch step has two sections, which is processor and aggregator. So we'll first discuss about this batch job. So it have different properties which are configurable, and based on this, it create those queues, those persistent queues. So the first is nothing but the name, what name you want to give it to this batch scope. The second, but one of the main property is max field records. So this property tells about at till what point this batch should be executed. Let's say if I say the max field records is 0, then even if one records fail at any step in this batch processing, the whole batch job will be terminated and land into the on complete phase without processing the remaining records. B- So again, like you can give it any integer value. If I say 13, so at max 13 records can fail before the termination of this batch job. And if there is a 14th failure, this batch job will be terminated, and the control will be on to the on complete phase. And if you want to just run the batch job irrelevant of whatever errors I'm getting, I can just make it -1. So it can take infinite number of failures of the records within any batch step. So the next property is called scheduling strategies, is nothing but what we have more studied under the process strategy in CPUs also. So we have two options here. We can go with ordered sequential or round robin. So ordered sequential is nothing but based on the created timestamps, it takes in the record. So yep, and when we talk about round robin, it is more about uh, the the execution time of the CPU is allocated in a round robin way. Like let's say record one first. Sorry, the block one takes the control first, and even if it is not completed, it is the control is moved to the block two. And so we have a something called a threshold time limit in round robin. So let's say that threshold, or we call it as quantum, is, let's say it's 10 seconds. So every block will get 10 seconds of time for its execution, irrelevant of it is completed or not. So these are the two fashions which we can follow while using batch processing. So our next property is job instance ID. It is nothing. It's defaulted to some correlation ID which will be provided to this batch job. And if you want to give your user a custom instance ID, you can always give it here. So it's nothing but a unique identifier for that batch job. The next property which comes is the batch block size. So this defines, as it says, batch block size is nothing but the size of a group of records. Okay, let's say, uh, let me bring up notepad here. Let's say I have a collection size of 100. Okay, so these 100 records I'm giving to that batch process, and the block size I'm giving as 10. So this will signify that each block here will have 10 records each. So on total, I will have 10 blocks. So if I to make it more clear, if I have collection of 110 and block size is 10, then I will have 11 blocks which will have 10 records in each block. So this property tells about how many records will be part of that particular batch block. So as you see, it's 100 and block size is 10. So on total, I will have 10 blocks or 10 groups of 10 records in each of them. The next property comes as the max concurrency, which helps in achieving the parallelism. So the how many threads can run in parallel, or how many blocks can run in parallel. This will be controlled by this property. If I don't give it anything, the default will be decided upon the how many CPU cores you have into two. So twice the number of available cores in your system, that much threads will be allocated to that particular batch job. But depending on if you have any memory constraints, or if you see the batch processing is taking a lot of memory and CPU, you can always limit the number of threads here. by giving integer value to that max concurrency. And the last one is nothing but the target. So it creates a target variable which whatever report we get in the on complete phase, that will be stored in that target variable. So we'll talk about these two properties majorly, which is batch block size and the max concurrency. So these are the two very important things which controls the whole batch processing and helps in fine tuning it. So when we say batch processing is asynchronous, it doesn't mean each record is each record of that 100 collection is running in parallel. It does mean that the blocks are running in parallel and the records in those blocks are running in a sequential manner. So it's not the records of all 100 records which are in parallel, it's the block. So out of this configuration I get 10 blocks, and then let's say the concurrency is 2, then out of these 10 blocks only 2 blocks will be running in parallel, and the other 8 are will be in the waiting state. Do we have any questions on this? Everybody's clear? Okay, I guess we are good on.
There are few questions, Chetan.
Yep.
Let me call it out and let me check. So how we can find the failed record in the batch? Which record failed?
Yeah, it's again depends on the error handling what we gonna implement, and batch processing also gives us some functionality to handle those errors. So we'll talk more about it as it's a part of our demonstration and after demonstration. But again, you can as whatever we do in um, error handling part, you can always drag a error handling scope here at the processor level. If you want to handle that at the record level, you can always drag that error handling scope here, and you can always write to a staging area or send a mail or whatever you want to do with that record if it failed.
Okay. After load and dispatch, internal queue after message dispatch to process step, the message will be deleted automatically.
The queues.
It's saying like after load and dispatch internal queue,
Mhm.
after the message dispatch to process step, the message will be deleted automatically.
No, like the queue has to be there always, right? If we talk about those queues will be there at until the batch processing finally runs and reaches to the on complete phase and afterward.
Okay. Order sequential and the round robin. Does it apply to block or particular record?
It applies to the block.
Okay. Yeah. What is the max size that we could provide for the batch block size?
It totally depends. There's no limit on it. It totally depends on your use case. So if you go through the MuleSoft documentation, they also enlisted some scenarios where, let's say, I will take reference of that. There is a scenario where, let's say, in their batch processing, each record have 3 MB of data. So that's a huge data, right? And if a block is running in, like if a block is being executed, all all the records of those block will be in the heap memory or in the in memory of our MRT or Mule runtime. So this is affecting the memory and consuming a lot of memory. So to lower it down, you can always go with a lower batch size, let's say 10. Okay, but if let's say you have a lot records, and each record is just in bytes or even lesser, a few bytes, then I can even go with 500 block size, because that is not affecting my heap memory at all, and it is speeding up the process.
Okay. The other 8 would be in the queue in the file store, right? So weakness, what is like? Can you just write the question from start, like, so not getting this. So it's saying, does this mean 10 queues are created per block?
No, it's just a one file which is created, and it can have some reference files also. We will see if I am able to if you see, if you can see the explorer here. So it talks about we have if I go to my mule runtime mule and .mule folder, this is my project, and if I click on it, I have a folder called queue store. So in here, all those file will be there if I trigger that. So when we move to the live demonstration, I will show you how it looks like. So
Okay.
all the block information will be stored in a single file.
How does payload size of each record impact the heap size?
Yeah, as I answered before, right? Let's say if each record, if it's a image, let's say, so each record is an image of 3 MB, then and if I'm loading let's say a block of hundreds, then it is around 300 MB or more. And if I of constraint of let's say zero point 0.1 vcore, then 300 MB into the memory is not a good idea, right? Because I'm already consuming most of it, and the other processes are also running. So it may lead to the crash of the whole application. So I can lower it down to 10 or something. Yeah.
Are block process in parallel of record in the block are process in parallel? What does this mean? Samuel, can you write the question correctly? Which one is better, order sequential or round robin? And from performance perspective.
It totally depends on use case. So if you know about, if you study about this different processing strategies, so you have to choose between what fits better in your use case. So there's nothing which is good or bad, but generally what we follow is ordered sequential. Round robin is something which we want to follow in some cases where it is necessary, but again it depends on use case. So what we generally follow is ordered sequential.
Okay. Can the batch processing be spread across the workers to handle the more load? I don't think so.
No, no, it can, like as we talked about that persistent queues, right?
Yeah, VM queues.
Yeah, so it can lead to redundancy and stuff. So yeah, it can mess up all whole process.
And also, like with persistent queue, there might be chances the record may be processed duplicate, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
it also lower the performance by 10 times, which is
yes,
mule. Yeah.
that's correct.
How to increase the batch size can increase the speed of process.
Oh yeah, again, like I guess it's a similar question. It totally depends on the record size, what that record is, and how you are processing it, and what all the steps of process you are doing.
Okay. Are blocks processed in parallel or records in the block are processed in parallel? You already answered this, right?
Yeah, so yeah, the blocks are run in parallel, and the records in each block will go sequential.
Okay. Yeah, good to go. Yeah, we have done with all the questions. Just
Okay.
one more questions come. If the message size is 3 MB, block size is 10, number of blocks equals to 11, concurrency is 2, how much heap memory will be used? So
No,
I will repeat. Message
okay.
size is equals to 3 MB
Hmm. Okay.
and 3 MB message size. Block size is 10,
Okay.
number of block is 11,
Okay.
and concurrency is 2.
So yeah, again, we can't calculate it, but like we don't have a
Correct.
formula. But again, you have to think upon looking at the statistics. So I was about to talk about that part, like how you can check the performance as I mentioned in the previous sessions also, like if I am building a bad job, which is always an interesting thing to do. So you can always rely on some performance monitoring systems. And if you don't have any other application, we always have a Java in our systems. So you can always use JConsole and listen to that process ID which is running your Mule runtime, and it will show you the statistics how it is performing with this configuration. So this will give you a rough idea how it's gonna look like on cloud, and you can take a better decision based on that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, we can go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, a little bit more about this block size and how the records are processed. I will clarify it one more time. So I will get records in such a way, and so on. And at the end, I have 91 to 100. So these many blocks I will have, the 10 blocks, and let's say I have concurrency 2. So any of the two blocks will run uh, by the two threads, and let's say record 1 to 10 will run in sequential manner, record 11 to 20 will run in sequential manner. You will never find like you got record 5 before record 1.
Yeah. Chetan, I have one question. So if I keep number of like concurrency is equals to number of blocks, so how it will impact the performance of batch processing? Like, is it
Okay,
good idea? Is it good idea to keep concurrency equals to number of block?
yeah, again, like if your payload is very small and it's not impacting, and your current configuration, the v codes can withstand it, you can always go with it.
Okay.
Okay, great. Now let's move a little bit deeper, which is our batch steps. So I can have multiple batch steps in each batch job, and batch step have these three properties, which is not first is nothing but the name of that batch step, second is the accept expression, and third is the accept policy. Accept expression is nothing but the filter which we put on for a particular record. Let's say record 1 is getting into that batch step, and if I say, let's say, uh, so what we have is the record level access. So each record is treated as an individual payload for each step. So let's say I have a key in my record which is, let's say, order number. Okay, so I put a filter like only those order numbers which are equal to 32 should be entertained by this batch step. So this is what accept expression do. So other payloads or records which have order number other than 32 will not inbound to this batch step. So this is what our accept expression do. So this batch step is accepting all the records which will accept this data weave expression. The next property is accept policy. It's again talks about the acceptance of that record. So if I say all or non-failure, by default it is no failures. So it will take those records only which are not failed in previous batch steps. So let's say I have two batch step. If I have two batch step, and in second batch step I am saying no failures. So if, let's say, record 1 failed in batch step 1, and it inbounded to batch step 3, and batch step have a accept policy of no failures, so it will not take in that record for processing, because it got failed in the previous step. Similarly, uh, we can use only failures if we want to deal with, let's say, it's a very useful in case of error handling scenarios. Let's say I want to entertain all the records which are failing in the first step, and my first step is doing nothing but inserting to a database. Okay, So I have an on error continue or something, or the insertion failed for a record 1 and 3 out of 10. So that 1 and 3 always inbound to this, and I can always write it to file or send a mail to the client saying, hey, well, record 1 and 3 failed with this reason. So in that case, I can use accept policy as no only failures. So I'm entertaining only failed records in this batch step. And when it comes to the precedence, these uh, these two expression and policy are always treated as end operation. So though both of them should fulfill to in order to take that record into that batch step. And first the accept policy is being evaluated by Mule, and afterward, if it passes, it checks on the expression passes or not. So so we can say accept policy takes the precedence over the accept expression. And when we go inside batch step, we have two section: processors and aggregator. So you can include as many as processor or whatever processing you want to do on that particular record. It can be some transformation. Let's say I want to do transformation at record level. I am doing some transformation and then inserting it to database. So if I want to do it at for each and every record, I will always go with this processing section. And the other section in the batch step is the aggregator section. So I have to pull in a batch aggregator first to utilize this section. I put an aggregator, and let's say I don't want to insert. I don't want to insert record by record. I want to go in groups. So I what I can do is I will do a transformation on array of records and do a bulk insert to my database. So these are the two parts of batch steps, and this is how we can utilize them. If you want to give sorry, if you want to do some processing on a group of records, you can go with aggregator. And if you want to do it at the each record level, then you have to you can go with the processor section. So it's none of them is mandatory like you should it's not no rule like you should have a processor or you should have an aggregator. Any one of them should be there, or both of them can be there. Do you have any question, Jackie?
Yes, Chetan, there are few questions. So let me read out.
Mhm.
Uh, so if there are many batch step in the batch job, is it easy to write m unit test cases?
It's for in M units, it's very tough to write because it's a synchronous scope, right? So it's always challenging to cover the batch process as a part of the coverage. So I have, generally speaking, I have never done it because we always find it complex if we are writing M units with for that batch because it's a totally asynchronous. Even if your flow is running and M unit triggered your flow, it will jump into the next processor and the batch is not covered as a part of that coverage.
Okay. Can we find the only particular field record?
Uh, yeah, like when you say you want to find the particular field record, do you mean at the end of the whole execution, or the best approach is whenever you are getting a failed record, you always you handle it there only, or stage it in some area, or you can have a failure batch step which is taking care of all those stuff. We have some functionality from MuleSoft also. At batch step level, we have some functions which can be used to know about the status of that particular that particular record, like if it failed in any previous step, or what is the exception with what it failed. So you're gonna take a look at that. uh,
Okay.
So these are some functionals which can be used for error handling also. We have is successful record. So in, let's say, in batch step 2, I can do batch colon colon is successful record, so it will return true or false based upon this particular record is ever failed in the previous batch steps or not. So similarly, we have different functions which can help for better handling, error handling.
Okay. Each batch step scope invoke with one record in the payload or all the record in the batch block.
Sorry, can you please pardon?
Each each batch step scope invoke with one record in payload or all the record in batch block.
Is each batch step scope? No, yeah, the okay. You mean to say what that payload gives us if I write a payload, right? So if I am writing it in here in the processor level, that payload is nothing but the single record. But let's say I'm aggregating and I'm aggregating, let's say, with size of 10, then then I will, in that payload I will get array of 10 records.
Okay. Does accept policy impact accept expression or vice versa?
No, like it's a there is an AND operation between both of them. If you say uh, you can say it as policy and there is an AND operation between them, policy and expression. Okay, so first the policy is being considered, like that particular record is fulfilling that policy or not. If it is following it's following that policy, then we will evaluate that expression and see that is passing that expression or not. Because as you know, due to some, it might be due to some uh, memory constraint, expression is put at the second, and it's the right way also, right? Because as you know, it's an intensive process when we CPU intensive process when we evaluate an expression. So we first better check it ever failed or not, or fulfilling the policy, and if yes, we can go with any expression which can be complex, and to know it is eligible for that step or not.
Okay. Can we jump from step 1 to step 3 directly? We cannot do it, right?
No, like we don't have anything like if I have 3 steps and that record is full is good to go with batch step 2, then it will for sure, it will not skip the batch step 3. Let's say if until unless, let's say, in batch step 1 that record passed, and in batch step 2 I'm only entertaining only failures, then it will for sure not go to batch step 2, right? Because it's a successful record, so it will skip to the next step.
Right. It depend on expression also, right?
Yes, expression also correct.
Do we ever keep the accept policy value as a all?
Yep. Let's say I'm synchronizing to two different system. First is database, and second is some other, let's say, service now or something XYZ. So let's say it failed while writing to database, but I don't want it to be failed for writing it to service now also. So in that case, I can go with all. Whatever happened with the insert operation, I don't care. I just want to go with inserting to service now also. Then I in get that case, I can go with all.
Okay. O- all failure is only for the previous one batch step or previous batch step.
It's all the previous batch steps.
How the message failure will be identified in batch step 2 from batch step 1?
Message failure. Okay, can you please pardon?
How message failure will be identified in the batch step 2 from batch step 1? So basically he trying to say,
Mm,
like, if something got failed in batch step 1,
mhm.
how batch step 2 will come to know, like, basically. So your batch step 2 might be having expression policy as only failures, basically, right? So
So
how?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all maintained in the queues. If you see that queue file, it's totally binary. It's readable, but all the information related to each record, what happened with it, if it failed, how it failed, at what step it failed, all is there in those files. So this is how batch processing get to know what exactly what's the history of that record. So
and uh,
similarly,
and
yeah,
also I think we can use the rage errors and all those things, right? We can add that logic if we erase the error, so it is a kind of some failure, right? And also we can use some error handling, try catch block and all those things. So in that case, if anything goes failed, it can automatically move to only failure, right, Chetan?
Yes, yes. Let's say if my record is, let's say I'm trying to fetch some data and it's not there, so I want to fail that record, then I can raise an error and do whatever I want to do with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's again the processing strategy based upon your use case, what exactly you want.
correct.
There's no thumb rule behind that.
What is the streaming, like streaming checkbox in batch aggregator?
Yeah, we'll discuss more about it. So we can skip to next question because I'm going to discuss about the streaming and other properties
What is a
related.
good approach to read the large CSV file and pass input the batches to batch processing?
Uh, when you say large, if it is good to give it to batch job, like your memory is supporting, then you can go with any number, million, 2 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million. Is this what the question is?
No, it's saying like what is the good approach? It's like doesn't what does this mean? Good approach, like large file, like So basically, it's saying what's a good approach to read the large CSV file and pass input in the batches in the blocks to batch processing.
Mm, so actually I didn't get the question. If we read the file, we read the whole file, right? Uh,
Correct.
if it's a CSV file, so we can use a read operation, or if it's coming from some other system, or we are reading it from Azure or some places, we always use that connector to read it.
Yeah. If you want to get a failure record in a particular batch step, then inside the batch step you can create try script. So if any record failed, okay, this is somebody within the particular batch step are all record in the batch block process in a parallel or sequentially.
Yeah, it's sequential. In within a block, all the records of that group are sequential.
Can one block of a record transfer to the batch step 2 when another block has not entered the batch step 1?
Yeah, that can happen. That doesn't mean, like, let's say if there is two blocks which are running concurrently, and block one is still executing in batch step, and block two already done with all its record, it will go to the batch step two. It won't wait
If
for.
I was yeah, if I have a sum 20,000 records, 20K records, in which 15K records has a flag equals to true, and rest of the 5K record have a flag equals to false, and I want to perform some transformation on record which have a flag equals to true, and aggregate the record as a error data which has a flag false. How can we achieve inside the batch processing?
Yeah, you can always use except expression, right? Because you are giving 20K records and 5K of them having, let's say, false. So if in first step you can say filter, give all those records which have having flag as false, and do the relevant processing. And you can have second batch step, which and in that batch step you can say expression payload dot flag equal to true. So you will can enter in all the records which having true flag in that batch second batch step.
Is
Yeah,
there
sorry,
any
Josh. So just to add on, so can we receive the same setup for record in the second batch step? I mean, you said like we can have it, we can achieve it with the help of accept expression, right? So in the first batch step, we can have that as flag equal to true, and in the you mean to say the next batch step we can have the same like
Yes, all
version?
20K records, all the records will inbound. It's nothing like if you filtered in which batch step one, so only the remaining will one will go to the next step. All the records will again inbound to the batch step two, irrelevant of what's the expression in batch step one.
Okay, so you mean to say whatever the payload is getting in the batch step, the same payload will also be getting in the batch step.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
is there any way to decrypt the message in queue? I don't think.
Uh, it's already like in binary format, and it's not going out of your system. So I don't think, like, if it's already encrypted, it's encrypted. But No, we that dispatch and processing phase is, and load and dispatch phase is not under our control.
Correct. Can batch steps run parallelly? It's sequentially only, right?
Uh, no, okay. Again, it depends. Let's say I have 10 records. 5 are fulfilling for batch step one expression, and the second one, the other 5 is fulfilling the next
Correct.
five. Then both can run in parallel. That's fine because the other 5 there's nothing to do with the step one.
Somebody, if it's not fit in a heap's memory file size CSV file, whose size is not able to fit heap? I don't understand. Darsan, can you write the question properly? Okay. S- So all the records in the block must be completely processed in the one batch step for the next to available to next batch step. It again depend on expression, right?
Yes, it again depends. So if I say the steps are sequential, those are sequential in that way. Let's say I have 10 records. I will take the example again. I have 10 records. For first step, 1 to 5 are fulfilling, and then for the second, for the other file, that will be skipped for batch step one. So that will somewhere it is stored like it already processed by batch step one, not actually processed by the processors in the batch step, but it already gone through the batch step one, right? Because either it's skipped or it inbounded, but it's overall processed by batch step one, even if it is skipped, right? So it can always go to batch step two. Hope that makes sense and it's clear. Hello?
Read a file in batch step.
Yes, you can. You can read a file in batch step. It's the same set of processor you can use, what you can use outside the batch job.
What is the approach to read a large file and send data to batch process, but it's not good idea to read the entire file in memory? In that case, how we can split the record and send batch process instead of reading it entirely in memory?
Yeah, again, yeah, that's a topic of memory management in data weave. I guess Ravi has written a very good blog on that, like how data weave manages all those stuff. So it have some buffers in place, and if your data goes about those buffers, it start writing it to the file systems. So yeah, it's a kind of memory management, and you can always tweak some parameter, the system properties of data weave to achieve best according to your use case.
Okay. Expression all. Expression also only failed record. So which step two or all the failed to combine?
Let me read it again. Suppose we have three batch step. Batch step one, expression is all. Expression is only field records. Expression is only field records. So which data come to the batch step three? The field records of only batch step two. It's the all, irrelevant of in what step it failed. If it is failed in one also or two also, it will inbound to three also.
Are separate persistent you created internally for different batch job?
Yes, if let's say you run the batch job twice and the first is still under execution. So as we discussed, it create files in this format. It has a prefix with a batch instance ID in its name. So two
Yeah.
different files will be created.
We can start with demonstration basically.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, okay. So we'll talk about aggregator now. So before Mule 4.3, we don't have this preserve MIME type option, and we'll discuss why we exactly have it now. So streaming checkbox This aggregator size and streaming is totally mutually exclusive. Like you can either make it streaming, or you can either use a aggregator size. So let's say I'm saying aggregator size is 10. So if let's say first record, second record, it will wait until 10 records are aggregated, and all the processor within that aggregation will run after it accumulates or collect all the 10 records, which based upon the size of it. But if I say it's streaming, I have to remove it. If I say it's streaming, then it's a continuous process where the data is continuously being streamed as soon so it will take as many as records it can take based upon how many are inbounding to batch step. So it will keep on streaming it. But the catch is, you have to streaming is only possible when you have connectors or components or operation which supports streaming. Let's say it's supported by VMs, it's supported by file connector. So the internal processors which you are going to use, it should also be supporting the streaming if you are enabling this streaming option. So the second property is preserving MIME type. So this comes into the picture because the problem which we were facing before 4.3 was when the array of the records are created here, it is not preserving the actual MIME type. Let's say I have inbound a collection of JSON objects, and 10 objects are accumulated here. But when I try to retrieve it here, it is converted to some binary format internally. It's not preserving its actual MIME type. So that's why MuleSoft introduced this checkbox. So if I try, after enabling this checkbox, if I try to retrieve the payload here, I will get the intact JSON objects in a collection for all the records. So this was the main purpose of including this preserve MIME type checkbox here. So this is all about batch job steps and aggregator. And at the last, if all the batch steps are completed uh, uh, based upon the configuration, like if it is a failure or not, like when everything is completed within batch step, it lands to the third phase of the batch processing, which is on complete phase. So in on complete phase, it talks about some statistics like how many records got inbounded, what's the instance ID, how many are failure out of all those records, and it gives some step level information also if you want to dig it up internally. And you can always do operations which are needs to be done after all the processing is done on all the batch of records. So we can include on complete with, let's say uh, uh, let's say I am loading data from system 1 to system 2, and at the end of the completion I want to send a mail to someone saying, hey, the process completed with this much records, and this is the out of this much field. So I can put a send mail connector here in the on complete phase, and send it to the relevant people. So these are the phases, three phases we have. um, and Now let's move to demo. So let's talk about this flow which I have built. So what I'm doing here is I am taking a number from my request and I created the records based on the number. So let's say if I get 10 payload as 10, so I will create 10 records or 10 JSON objects and give it to the batch process. I am creating a test variable here. So we will see how the variables behave inside batch job, and the and I'm just triggering the flow here. Yes, it started. uh, so as you can see in body, I'm just giving 10 as of now, and my configuration, if you want to see, is -1, like don't fail it if it is there any error. Block size is 2 and haven't configured concurrency, so it will be taken default based on the number of cores available. So I will have two block size. That means if I'm giving 10 records, I will have 5 blocks having 2 records in each. So let me trigger it. Okay, so this ran, and I have these 10 records in here, an array of 10 objects, and I'm giving it to this batch job. So the first record which we got into the batch step 1 is record 1. If you see here, hope it's visible to everyone. Let me know if it's not. So we got the first record into our batch step, which is 1, and let's see what we get if I do next. So I got 3. I didn't got 2, so that means I got how the batches are created is 1 2 3 4 5 6 and finally 9 and 10. So I the block size is 2. So these are the pairs we have in each block. So the first record I got is record 1 and the second I got is record 3. So what I can expect in the third execution is something from the first record from any of these, which can be 5, 7 or 9. So if I do next here, I got a 9 here. So it's a first record from the last block, and again so on. I will get a first block from some other block, which is 7, and again 5. So all the first records are executed. Now I'm keep getting the second records of each block. So now it's record 10 and so on. So you have seen it's running in uh, parallel fashion. The blocks are running in parallel fashion, but the records are within a block is running in a sequential way. And if you want to see what I got as a response, let me share. Where did it go? So this is the body. This is the body which I got. Even though process is executing, the information after triggering the batch job is like after load and dispatch phases talks about what's the creation time, how many records are there, and status. It says executing and the other information. So let me run this and move to on complete phase. And in on complete phase, I do have some information like so this is the information I got in the incomplete phase, which talks about how many total records are loaded, how many of them are failed, and other relevant information. If I want to dig more, I can always you can always see here, if you enlarge the payload, um, it have a key called step results. And if I go into step results, I have a array which talks about each step and what happened within that step, like how many records it received and how many of them are successful or failed. So this is how it was with this current configuration. Let's see how it works when I limit the max concurrency. I'm saying it as block of 4 and max concurrency as 2. So I have two threads for parallel execution of blocks, and each block will have 4 records. So if I'm giving 10 records in total, I will be getting three three blocks, which is 1 to 4, 5 to 8, and finally 9 and 10. So let's trigger it. So deployed. So the first record I got is record 1 here. If I do next, I would be expecting 5 or 9. So I got 5 here, and next I will get 9. Oh, sorry, I won't get 9 because the reason behind it is I set concurrency to only 2. So only 2 blocks are executing, which is this one and this one. So this block is in waiting state as of now, and I will be getting records from these two blocks in parallel. So yeah, as soon as the first block is completed, I got the first record from the waiting state block, which is 9. So this is how these two parameters of batch job helps or changes the behavior. Let's say if I'm inbounding 10 records and the block size is, let's say, 10. Okay, so I will have a single block of 10, which means this will block, even if I give max concurrency as 10 also, it will not be utilizing it because the whole collection which is inbounding is given to a single block. So in that in that case, the whole batch processing is nothing but a sequential execution, because the block size is same as the what is the size of the collection which is inbounding to the batch job. So there's in that case there's no sense of using batch. We can go with simple asynchronous scope if you think all the collection should be considered as once for processing. I hope we are clear on that part. Okay, let's move to the second part of this demo. What I will do is we will see how this aggregator behaves. I will pull up a aggregator, and I will try to write that information to my to a file. Let's say I'm writing to a file. What transformation I would like to do is uh, write it in JSON, and what I will say is payload dot, write it as CSV. Okay, it's easy to understand. Okay, payload dot record. Okay. So what I'm doing in the aggregator section is I am taking the record number and writing it to a file. Let me choose the directory. So in file operation, I'll take in I will save it on desktop. So I'm writing to a file called test.txt, and I'm writing the records in aggregator fashion to that file. And the writing mode I would be using is overwrite. So whenever the new data is written to this file, it will overwrite the old data. And what I will consider here is, let's say, aggregator size of 4. Okay, so I'm preserving MIME type, aggregator size of 4 with no streaming. And let's see how it behaves in this case after restarted. Meanwhile, do we have any questions?
There are many questions.
Okay.
Can the recorder record a block from the batch step 1 go to second batch completed in batch step 1, or it waits for other record of its block?
No, as I mentioned, it's sequential. So the blocks can move to the second step, but not the record of that. So it's as is sequential. So it will never happen like record 2 of that particular block is processed before record 1. Record 2 gets the chance once the record 1 is processed by that step, right?
Correct. Can we use the batch processing as a source of triggering process?
Like uh, oh, I don't understand the use case. I can't imagine the use case where we can use batch processing in order to trigger some other process, let's say some other batch process. But again, yeah, let's say let's say I'm triggering a batch job where what I'm doing is let's say I have two batch jobs. First batch job is responsible for loading all the customers from system 1 to system 2, and after the loading of customers are done, what I would like to do is loading of orders. So in on complete phase of batch job 1, I can call the batch 2 batch job 2 to start loading the orders. But it again depends on the use case.
Each batch job instance and the batch block are the same thing.
Yes, like batch job is the scope, and if you say behind the scene, the instance or the memory allocated to that particular batch job is nothing. We call it as instance, and it do have a unique identifier called instance ID.
Okay. Go for process.
For each parallel, again, yeah, for each parallel is asynchronous in nature when it comes to the each record, right? But it's the main thread is still waiting for its execution to complete. But in case of batch job, the main thread never waits for its completion. So if I'm pulling a parallel for each, and I'm doing some transformation or anything in a concurrent way, then the main thread will wait until that parallel for each is done, and once it is done, the main thread will move afterward.
In batch aggregate, will it wait for all the records to be processed by the process step and stream all the records at the once, and all be continuous process?
Sorry, I didn't get it. Whose question it is?
Asutosh Kumar. In batch aggregator,
Okay.
will it wait for all records to be processed by the processor step, or and stream all the records at once, or it will be continuous process?
The process step and stream all the records at once. No, like as soon as the records being processed by all the processor in the process components, it will inbound to the aggregator, and it keep on running that whatever in that particular aggregator. So it will not wait and fire. It will just keep on doing those stuff. That's why we call it streaming. If we are accumulating it, there is no sense of streaming, right?
Yes.
Because we are, yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. And the batch entries are cleared once after batch processing complete.
Yeah, like if it's a hybrid system or a standalone MRT, you can always go to that particular folder which I mentioned. I will run it and show you how that queue looks like. So let's say in your runtime you will find a folder mule. In mule you will find dot mule. So in that dot mule you will find a directory with your application name, and that directory contains all the queue information, either be it's object store or VMs and any other transactional queues or batch step queues. So everything is in here. So if you go to queue store folder, you will find the files of that particular with that particular instance ID. But you don't need to take care of it. Like if it's already finished, it will be cleared up from here. And in Cloud Hub, you will always get an option where it shows that queue in the queue section with BSQ and the instance ID.
Okay.
Hope that answers.
Yeah, we can go.
Okay, great. Uh, so let's see. To do a quick recap, we have 10 records inbounding, block size as 4, and max concurrency as 2. And we have an aggregator which is non-streaming, preserving MIME type, and aggregator size of 4. Like this aggregator processors will be triggered once it reaches the count of 4, and it's deployed. Let's see how it behaves in that case. So I triggered it. I got response, and it says everything is complete. Cannot course number 7 to object. Okay. Okay. Yes, then I need to do record. I was writing a CSV and I forgot to give it a object key. I guess this will work. As of now, this file is created, but it don't have anything. Let me trigger it again. Okay. So now the process is completed with total records process is 10, and let's see that file. So I got only 2. So what we can say is when those 3 blocks were running, and at the end this block was processed, and the 2 are aggregated and got overridden. So all the progress which was there before, like first 1 to 4 might have been written there. Then when the 5 to 8 will was there, this was written, and at the end when the blocks this block executed, finally it overridden the data, and we finally got 9 and 10 only, not everything. Now let's see how it behaves when we do streaming on. Okay, I'll just remove this number from here. Let's say streaming on, and let's retry it. I'll just clear this data. Okay, this one is done. Now let's trigger it again. I sent it, and it ran 10 successful, and let's check the file again. Hola, I got all the 10 records here. So this is the advantage of streaming. So files, so we don't, the aggregator is not waiting for the particular threshold to reach before triggering those processors. Those processors support streaming, so we enable streaming, and as soon as it's getting the data, it just streaming to that particular file, and we got all the data in here at once. So yeah, this is the advantage of streaming, and we should go for it if we want to continuously stream to data to that target uh, system or area, uh, including that connector should also support streaming. Yeah, so this is how the streaming and preserving MIME type works, and now we will see what those queues are exactly. So it keeps asking. I just enabled the clearing the application data. So if I say yes, it will clear out all the persistent queues and stuff. And if I say no, it will just start from the last execution if it is interrupted. So we'll see it that also, like how it exactly behaves in that case. So as you meanwhile it starts, we can discuss about how we can do the performance tuning for a batch job. So there are some thumb rules we should follow. Like whenever we are giving data to batch job, we should not give extra variables to it, which is of no relevance and have a high volume. Because when we inbound any event to that batch process, it replicates all its variable to every record. So if let's say I have this test variable, so this variable will be replicated for each and every record. Like it's every record will have a variable called test variable, and it will consume a lot of memory if it is not being used, and it has a lot of data. So better get rid of these kind of variables or unnecessary data before feeding anything to the batch job. Okay, so I got my control here. I triggered the batch job, so it's running. Now let's check that folder. I I got some files here, right? Everyone can see I have a instance ID, which is same as what we have here, is CDFA here, and we got multiple files, which is helpful for maintaining the queues, steps, and other information. If I open it up, it's something which we don't understand, but you can see some bifurcations here. So I have this first part, then I have second part and third part. So this is nothing but the each blocks. So I currently have 3 blocks, which is nothing but these ones. And those 3 blocks information are being stored in here in these queues. So this is how those files look like for a batch job, and after the batch job is completed, it got vanished. if you want to see how your batch job is performing, to get a rough idea, you can always go to um, Java folder. You can choose for gre bin, and there you will find, I mean jdk, let me check. Yeah, sorry, I will correct it. So in Java, in under JDK bin, you will find application called JConsole, which can track a process, and based on and giving that process ID from the list, we can always track that particular process. Not sure why it's not taking. Okay, maybe some issue. I guess it's not listening to other processes of now. I'm not sure why, but you will see your MRT here, and you can click on it and say connect. And once it connects, uh, you can see something like this: the heap memory used by that process, how many threads are running, classes, what's the CPU usage for that process. So if you select that Mule runtime and your batch job is running, this data is very useful to understand how your batch job is performing with that your current configuration. Okay. Uh, at last, let's moving on to this. If this is in current execution. What if I stop it? I stopped it, and I go back to those queues. It should be there. Yeah, so those queues are still here. So this uh, helps in achieving the reliability, these persistent queues, and whenever this process is started again, it will resume for the same point. So I'm not clearing the application data, and I'll say just run it. So you see, I didn't triggered anything, and once the Mule application is deployed, it resumed from the last checkpoint for that batch, and it finally ran. So this is why we called it persistent and a reliable solution. But, and we don't find something similar in parallel for each or for each if anything goes wrong while in execution. Okay, yep, that's all from my side. Let me check if we have anything in extras. Uh, yep, so we already discussed about error handling, how it can be done, performance tuning, like as it's a record level access. Uh, the variables, the unnecessary variables should be gotten rid, because it's replicated to each and every record in the batch job. So these are some parameters the property values. uh, JConsole can help you better build a better solution based on your use case. Yep, that's all
Yeah,
from my side. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, Chetan, there are few questions, so we can take
Uh-huh.
it.
Yeah.
So when we move the scheduler batch job in prod, we are getting server restart. It's on-premise environment. Any solution for this?
uh, Server restart in case of if you are using batch job.
Yeah,
So yeah, it totally depends on, you have to monitor whatever you have configured for your batch. It's withstanding your current memory usage or the memory allocation or not. The the thing behind restart is only one, which is the heap issue. So you can always monitor that stuff, how it's performing, where exactly it's consuming, what's the spike, and come up with a better configuration which can handle that load.
yeah, you can use JConsole also to
Yes.
check it. So in aggregator, if we using streaming, how much data it will hold and stream?
In aggregator we are streaming. That's something internal. Like we have different Uber pools and buffers. Depending on that, it streams the data. But again, we have some configurable system properties also. If you think it's not, you are getting buffer issues, and it's related to your streaming, you can always tweak it. But as of now, there's no thumb rule like this should not go above it, because it again depends where your application is hosted.
Correct. So in aggregator, streaming will be a sequence.
Yes.
What will be the use of batch aggregator block in case of streaming?
Batch aggregator block in case of streaming.
Is-
I didn't get it.
Yeah, so I did the simple like it will do the aggregation of data aggregator block, but only difference when you are streaming, you don't have to define the size. It will automatically consider the size depending on your course basically. Can
Yes.
you please explain again difference between for each, parallel for each, and batch?
Yeah. Again, um, so when we say for each, it's something sequential. All the records go in sequential manner. uh, and in parallel for each, we can give the concurrency, like how many parallel threads can be used to execute each record in that scope. And batch processing is again similar when it comes to parallelism, but the main difference which segregates batch processing from parallel for each or for each is the main thread waits for each and parallel for each to its execution to be completed. But in case of batch job, it's not so. And we in batch job we get other useful features like better error handling, better record tracking, different error handling functionalities, and reliability of persistent queues also. But we don't get it in the parallel for each or for each.
Yeah,
And in for each, again, as it says, parallel and parallel for each and for each. So we choose to go with parallel or non-parallel based upon what we want to do. Let's say you are retrieving data from an end system. Let's say there's an API which is paginated, and you want to retrieve 10 pages, and that API don't have any rate limit on it, and it can withstand 10 records in a second. Then you can better go with a parallel for each, uh, and get all the 10 pages at the same moment.
yeah. So I think we have covered all the question.
Yep.
So Chetan, it was very a great session. Like it's a very informative session.
Yep.
So batch processing is always a complex topic, but you have covered very well. So a lot of information you have covered related to batch processing. Even and you also get into what kind of queues it created, like what kind of tools can be used, for checking the performance of your batch processing. So I think overall it was a very great session, and like thanks to be giving the session at the Surat MuleSoft Meetup, and looking forward for more session from you, Chetan.
Yep. Thank you for the invite. It
Yeah,
was such a lovely audience to interact with.
So Nitish, it's all up to you. So you can start your quiz. No, I will. Chetan, you can unshare your screen so
Yep.
Nitish can take it from here. So everybody can on their camera so we can take some pictures.
Uh, Hi Jackie, hi Chetan. Thanks for a great session, Chetan. And today I guess we all must have noted that there was a huge Q&A session, and you really gave all the answers. So okay, let me take it to quiz now. Am I screen visible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. Thanks for confirmation. Okay, so here today we'll be going with Kahoot again, and I'll just give a brief about Kahoot. So this game will be played on two screens. One screen you'll get a question and the options, and you'll see the time over here. So the time limit is 10 seconds, and we'll be having six questions today. And from the second screen, you need to choose the color options from the first screen. This is not a game pin. This is a dummy one. I'll share the one. So, am I clear? Any doubt with the game? I hope not, but just asking. Okay. So, this is a game pin.
So I also would like to congratulate Ravi Tamada for becoming a first delivery champion from Capgemini. So congratulations, Ravi.
Yeah, congratulations,
Congrats.
Ravi.
Hi Shiva.
Jackie, morning.
Good morning.
Hi,
Good morning.
Shiva.
Hey
Morning.
Nitish,
Hi.
how's it going?
Yeah, good. How about you?
Good?
I I guess winter's already knocked the door.
Yeah, winters are good.
Yeah.
Jackie, how it is going in Mumbai?
Yeah, it's everything is good. So climate is good. Bit moderate climate, not that much heat.
Climate. Good, good. And Nitish, where are you? Agra?
No, no. Bangalore.
So we have
Really?
four,
Oh, really?
10 more people to join the count queues. So guys, one more minute.
I guess you were having people around 75 to 78, and only
No,
36 entries.
yeah, no, we have a more than I think we have total checking around 117 people, but everybody doesn't interested in playing queues also,
Yeah, these days lots of vouchers people are holding.
Everybody is certified already.
Yeah, so people are waiting for level 2 now. MCD level
Yeah.
2.
Yeah.
Okay, we can lock, I think.
Sure, Jackie. Okay. Okay. I think it got to 37. Yeah. Okay, so I'm locking now. All the best, guys. Okay. Mix answers. Okay. Let's see the podium. So Vignesh, Padma, and Nitin. Okay. So Dev, Shyam, and Nitin. Podium got changed completely. Okay. So Dev, Shyam, and Charan. So Dev, Vignesh, and Tushar. Okay. Last question.
Yeah, they should be a decision maker between Dave and Vignesh, I guess.
Yeah.
All correct. No.
Still, I guess people are knowingly giving wrong answers because today I was hoping that people will give mostly right answers. Okay, let's see the
Now,
podium.
Jackie and you are doing a lot of events. People don't even remember the count, right?
Dev. Raj
Oh,
Lakshmi.
Raj,
Oh,
it's totally a what with a flip of or flip side of the tables. We didn't
yeah,
expect it. That's good. Congrats, Raj, Lakshmi, Vignesh, and Nitin.
Nitin.
can you please ping your email ID? Like, Nitish, can you take the email ID?
Yeah, sure. I'll just take it. Okay, I'll stop sharing.